It is difficult for modern people to grasp the logic of ancient justice, which lacked the correctional facilities we are accustomed to. The Roman Empire was famous for its monumental structures, aqueducts, and roads, but not for its prisons. For a long time, historians were unable to find the ruins of mass detention facilities within this vast empire. This fact stumped many researchers accustomed to the modern penitentiary system. However, archaeologists soon made a startling discovery that completely overturned our understanding of ancient law. It turned out that the Romans had a completely different, far more brutal approach to crime. Statistics show that the level of street crime in antiquity was paradoxically low for overpopulated metropolises. A city of 1 million people functioned without a massive police force, investigators, or pretrial detention facilities. The secret to this order lay not in humanism, but in the absolute paralyzing ruthlessness of punishment. Modern methods of combating crime seem like child's play compared to ancient practices. The state used fear as its primary tool for controlling millions of its citizens. It is precisely this brutal truth about ancient systems that compels us to take a fresh look at the history of civilization. The familiar concept of imprisonment as a form of punishment simply did not exist in the ancient mindset. The state had no intention of spending vast sums of money to keep criminals locked up for years or decades. The Roman approach was as pragmatic, economical, and frighteningly straightforward in its cruelty as possible. Cells were used exclusively as temporary holding areas for people awaiting trial or immediate execution. A criminal remained there for exactly as long as the authorities needed to pass a sentence. No one was sent to a cell for 10 years to reflect on their behavior. Modern correctional institutions strive to rehabilitate individuals and reintegrate them into society upon release. The ancient system did not set such noble and humanitarian goals for itself. The primary objective was to isolate the threat as quickly as possible and publicly destroy it. Keeping a person behind bars was considered a pointless waste of valuable state resources. It was far more effective to make the offender a visible example for all other citizens. The Romans thought in terms of intimidation, not the reform of wayward members of society. Often, the time spent in the dungeon amounted to only a few days or even hours. This was sufficient time to organize a swift trial and prepare the site for execution. In rare cases involving political figures, the wait could drag on for months. However, even for the elite, this was not a punishment, but merely an agonizing wait for the inevitable end. The system operated like a ruthless conveyor belt, where the cell was merely a brief stop before death. Such efficiency in the judicial process strikes modern lawyers as astonishingly categorical. The concept of parole or sentence reduction for good behavior was completely absent. Since there was no such thing as a fixed sentence, there was absolutely nothing to reduce. A person was either found not guilty and sent home, or found guilty and subjected to physical punishment. There were no intermediate options, such as community service or house arrest for ordinary people. This binary system of justice eliminated any uncertainty regarding the defendant's fate. The law was crystal clear, harsh, and understandable to absolutely every inhabitant of this vast state. Interestingly, the word carcer itself meant simply a fenced-in place in Latin. Originally, it was just a pen for holding animals before sacrifice. Over time, exactly the same pens came to be used for people awaiting their fate. The authorities' attitude toward the arrested was no different from their attitude toward livestock before slaughter. A person in a cell was completely stripped of all civil rights and ceased to be a person in the eyes of the law. It was absolute dehumanization, which prepared society for a bloody finale. The result is a rather paradoxical historical picture that shatters modern stereotypes. A state without a single real prison managed to maintain order more effectively than some modern countries. The absence of correctional facilities was compensated for by the incredible cruelty of the punishment itself. This model proves that human psychology responds much better to fear than to the prospect of isolation. The ancient world did not attempt to cure social ills. It preferred to immediately amputate the infected parts. Such historical truth sounds gruesome, but it perfectly explains the low crime rate of that time. Temporary detention facilities were veritable branches of hell on earth. They were usually deep underground pits where sunlight never penetrated. Ventilation was practically non-existent, so the air was saturated with unbearable odors of dampness and filth. Water constantly seeped down the stone walls, turning the earthen floor into a filthy, cold swamp. Under such conditions, even a few days of waiting for trial became unbearable torture for any human body. Just the thought of these dungeons sends a chill down one's spine. The state, as a matter of principle, did not allocate funds for the detainees' food. If relatives did not bring food, a person was doomed to a slow and agonizing death by starvation. The guards showed no compassion and did not share their rations with the accused. Often, the guards demanded bribes just to pass on a basket of bread from the family. The absence of close relatives in the city turned an arrest into a guaranteed death sentence even before trial. It is difficult for a modern person to comprehend such a degree of state indifference to basic needs. The dungeons were teeming with enormous rats that were unafraid of the weakened and shackled prisoners. These rodents attacked in the darkness, carrying deadly diseases and intensifying the atmosphere of primal terror. It was practically impossible to defend oneself against them due to the heavy chains and constant weakness. The animals devoured the scraps of food that relatives managed to pass on to the detainees. Living alongside these hungry predators turned every night into an endless, waking nightmare. Such conditions would break the psyche of any modern person in a matter of hours. No medical care was provided in these damp dungeons whatsoever. Wounds sustained during arrest or interrogation festered and became caked with dirt. If a person fell ill, they were simply left to die in a corner of the cell among the others. Ancient doctors never descended into these gloomy basements to treat criminals. The life of an arrested person held absolutely no value for either the state or society. Survival depended solely on the body's initial resilience and incredible luck. It is worth noting the incredible cynicism of the guards who manned these dreadful places. For a separate fee, they would allow relatives to go down to say goodbye to the dying. There was also a fee for the opportunity to quickly kill a prisoner to spare them further torment in the darkness. Corruption thrived on the misfortune of others, turning suffering into a steady source of income for the jailers. There was no oversight of their actions, which gave them unlimited power over defenseless people. It was a perfect ecosystem of cruelty where everyone reaped their own grim benefits. The conditions of detention served as an excellent warning to all potential lawbreakers. Every citizen knew of the horror that unfolded in those damp, dark dungeons. Rumors of rats, starvation, and maddening darkness spread through the streets faster than any official statement. The prospect of ending up there for even a couple of days terrified people far more than the very thought of death. It was this all-encompassing fear of the dungeon that kept many from acting rashly. This brutal preventive measure worked flawlessly, maintaining order in the vast city. Punishment in the ancient world never took place behind the closed doors of hidden courtyards. The state turned the taking of life into a grand spectacle, mandatory viewing for all segments of the population. Public executions were not merely an act of justice, but also a form of mass entertainment for the townspeople. Thousands of spectators gathered in the square to watch the suffering of the condemned criminals. The more gruesome the death, the greater the delight it aroused in the bloodthirsty crowd. This helped distract the people from the empire's economic problems and political turmoil. Crucifixion was considered one of the most shameful and agonizing methods of execution. This method was used primarily for slaves, pirates, and stateless people. The condemned person could hang on a wooden cross for several days, dying from dehydration, suffocation, and pain shock. Crosses were often erected along busy roads so that every traveler could see the consequences of breaking the law. The visual image of a person slowly dying was etched into the memory of passing citizens. Such brutal publicity for obedience worked far more effectively than any written laws. Gladiatorial arenas served not only as venues for sporting contests, but also for mass executions. Criminals could be sent into the arena unarmed against trained professional fighters. This was called execution by the sword, where the victim had not a single chance of survival. The audience placed bets on how long the unfortunate victim could evade the fatal blow. Such spectacles brought enormous profits to the organizers of the games and boosted the ruler's authority. The blood on the arena's sand was the best proof that the law was harsh but just. A particular form of sadistic art was considered to be being torn apart by wild animals for the amusement of the public. This method, known as damnatio ad bestias, was applied to the most vicious offenders and runaway slaves. People were tied to posts or forced to run around the arena from hungry lions, bears, and leopards. To heighten the effect, organizers would sometimes reenact mythological scenes, weaving real deaths into theatrical productions. Modern special effects directors would envy the sophistication with which the ancient Romans staged these bloody scenes. Cruelty was elevated to the status of the highest form of state art. More noble methods of execution were reserved for the elite. Patricians and citizens were not crucified or fed to beasts. This was considered an insult to their high status. Most often, nobles were beheaded with a sword, which guaranteed a quick death without prolonged suffering. However, even such a relatively humane punishment was always carried out in front of a large crowd. The fall of a noble head was meant to show the common people that absolutely all social classes were equal before the law. This political theater masterfully maintained the illusion of justice in a rigidly stratified society. An essential element of this bloody spectacle was the complete humiliation of the condemned before death. He was stripped naked, flogged, and forced to carry the instrument of his own execution through the entire city. The crowd had every right to spit on the criminal, throw stones at him, and shout insults. Psychological destruction preceded physical destruction, breaking a person's will to the core. By the time they arrived at the execution site, many victims were in a state of profound shock. This demonstrated society's absolute power over anyone who dared to violate the established rules. The cost of organizing such grandiose spectacles was covered by the confiscated property of the condemned. The state turned executions into a self-sustaining enterprise, yielding not only political but also financial benefits. The animals, executioners, and arena rental were paid for with the money of those who were killed in that arena. This gave rise to a dangerous practice in which wealthy people were falsely accused in order to replenish the empty treasury. Justice was often blinded by the glitter of gold, sending the innocent to be torn apart by lions. The economy of terror worked flawlessly, constantly demanding more and more victims. Ultimately, these brutal public spectacles served a crucial function of social engineering. They channeled the crowd's aggression, directing it toward outcasts and criminals rather than the ruling elite. People who watched others suffer felt safe and grateful to the emperor. Bloody spectacles united society better than any political speeches or economic reforms. That is precisely why the level of street crime remained low in a city where blood flowed like a river every day. Fear and spectacles became the two main pillars of the greatest empire of antiquity. The ancient judicial system categorically did not tolerate bureaucratic red tape or lengthy paperwork. Trials proceeded with astonishing speed, often taking no more than a couple of hours from start to finish. No one compiled voluminous case files, conducted complex expert examinations, or questioned dozens of witnesses. The judge listened to the prosecutor, listened to the defense attorney, and immediately delivered his final, unappealable verdict. This swiftness left the criminal no time to seek influential patrons or bribe the guards. The mechanism of justice worked like a guillotine, quickly, precisely, and absolutely irrevocably. A thief caught in the act could lose his life that very same day without unnecessary formalities. The property owner was permitted to use force against a nighttime robber, even to the point of causing death. The right to self-defense and the protection of property was considered sacred and did not require lengthy legal proceedings. If a crowd caught a pickpocket in the market, they could stone or beat him to death with sticks before the guards arrived. The state turned a blind eye to such lynchings, considering them a natural manifestation of civil order. Harsh popular justice was far more effective than any sluggish police force. The social status of the accused played a decisive role in determining the severity of the punishment. What a patrician could get away with as a minor offense meant certain and agonizing death for a slave. The law openly declared the inequality of people, establishing different types of punishment for different social classes. A free citizen could simply be flogged for stealing food, while a slave was sent into the arena to face wild beasts. To a modern lawyer, such a selective approach seems barbaric and a flagrant violation of human rights. However, in antiquity, This rigid hierarchy was considered the foundation of the stability of the entire universe. Petty crimes, such as street theft or fraud, were punished with disproportionate cruelty. The authorities understood that it was precisely petty crime that created an atmosphere of chaos and danger in a vast city. Amputation of hands, branding the face, or brutal flogging were commonplace punishments for a stolen wallet. A person with a brand on their forehead became a permanent outcast, denied employment, and barred from respectable homes. Such irreversible disfigurement served as a lifelong social sentence. The value of the stolen item never matched the terrible price the thief paid. Torture was officially used as a legitimate tool for extracting confessions during investigations. It was generally forbidden to interrogate slaves without the use of physical violence, as it was believed that otherwise they would lie. Confessions extracted under torture carried much more weight in court than voluntary admissions. Specially trained individuals used the rack, red-hot iron, and whips to extract the desired words. This approach inevitably led to a vast number of false accusations and the framing of innocent people. To end the pain, a person was willing to confess to a conspiracy against the emperor or to stealing the moon from the sky. Appellate courts and review bodies did not appear immediately and operated very selectively. An ordinary person had neither the time nor the means to appeal an unjust verdict. Only Roman citizens of the highest class had the right to demand a personal hearing with the emperor. The famous phrase, "I demand the judgment of Caesar," saved the lives of many well-known historical figures. For millions of ordinary inhabitants of the empire, however, the first verdict was always the last and final one. The justice system offered no second chance to those without a fat wallet or a noble lineage. Paradoxically, this swift and merciless system ensured an incredible level of security. A criminal knew that between the theft and the severing of his hand, there would be not months of investigation, but only a few hours. The inevitability and speed of punishment paralyzed the will of potential offenders more effectively than any moral sermons. Modern statistics, with their rising recidivism rates, seem absurd compared to ancient methods of fighting crime. Roman justice did not cultivate good citizens. It simply methodically eliminated the bad ones. This harsh logic of survival allowed the empire to endure for hundreds of years amid constant warfare. The ancient law enforcement system functioned not only as a tool of intimidation, but also as a profitable business. Every convicted criminal was viewed by the state as a valuable economic resource that needed to be utilized wisely. Depriving a person of their freedom in a modern prison entails colossal expenses paid for out of the pockets of law-abiding taxpayers. The ancient administration turned punishment into a stable source of replenishment for the depleted treasury and a source of free labor. Paradoxically, crime financed many state projects and public entertainments. This ruthless pragmatism allowed for enormous savings in maintaining law and order in the provinces. The confiscation of a convict's property was a mandatory procedure upon a guilty verdict for serious crimes. The lands, slaves, gold, and homes of wealthy criminals instantly became the property of the state or the emperor. This rule set an extremely dangerous precedent, encouraging the fabrication of cases against the empire's wealthiest citizens. During periods of economic crisis, rulers regularly replenished the budget through mass repressions against the local aristocracy. Charges of treason became the most convenient tool for the ruling elite to quickly enrich themselves. Economic motives often prevailed over a genuine concern for justice or legality. Convicts who escaped the death penalty were sent to perform the hardest and most dangerous labor in the empire. They were exiled to lead and silver mines, where working conditions guaranteed death within a few years. This free labor force extracted the metal needed to mint coins and finance the vast legionary army. Fines for minor offenses constituted a significant portion of the city treasury's revenue. Insults, minor assaults, or violations of trade regulations resulted in substantial monetary payments to the victim and the state. The system was designed so that breaking the law was economically unprofitable for any citizen. If a person could not pay the fine, they fell into debt slavery, becoming the property of their creditor. Debtors worked off their offenses through hard physical labor, providing real benefits to the city's economy. It was a harsh but extremely effective system for monetizing offenses. The maintenance of law and order was often outsourced to private individuals or organizations. Owners of markets and large warehouses hired their own guards, paying for security out of their own pockets. The state did not spend money on patrolling every street, shifting these costs onto businesses. If private security caught a thief, they had the right to administer justice themselves or hand him over to the authorities. The decentralization of police functions allowed the empire to maintain order with minimal bureaucratic effort. The savings on the enforcement apparatus were colossal compared to today's bloated budgets. The trade in the bodies of the executed for medical research also provided prison guards with an unofficial income. Ancient doctors and anatomists needed material to study the human anatomy, which was officially prohibited by religion. Guards secretly sold the corpses of criminals to scientists, receiving substantial bribes in silver in return. Even after death, the offender continued to bring economic benefit to the system that had destroyed him. This grim market contributed to the development of ancient medicine. Though it was built on utter cynicism, the commercialization of death reached unimaginable heights in antiquity. Understanding this economic undercurrent forces us to take a fresh look at the entire ancient legal system. Behind the facade of harsh justice lay cold calculation and a desire to profit from every crime. The state did not merely punish, it profited from human vices and social instability. This self-sustaining machine of terror had no need for humanitarian reforms or the construction of comfortable prisons. The economy of cruelty proved so effective that it allowed the empire to dominate the ancient world for centuries. Modern prison systems, with their billions in losses, are a far cry from such cynical efficiency. The executioner was a key figure in the ancient justice system, despite society's contempt. The profession of the executioner, or carnifex, was shrouded in a grim aura of fear, revulsion, and religious superstition. This man performed the dirtiest work for the state, ensuring the inevitability of lawful retribution. Without his professional skills, the entire system of public intimidation would simply cease to function properly. However, society repaid him for this necessary work with complete social ostracism and hatred. Paradoxically, the executioner's life resembled that of the very people he sent to their deaths. The executioner was strictly forbidden to live within the sacred city limits, among ordinary, respectable citizens. His home was usually located outside the city walls, near mass graves or rubbish dumps. The ban on living in the city underscored his impurity and marginal status in the social hierarchy. He was not allowed to visit public baths, theaters, or vote at assemblies alongside the other residents. The executioner was a living ghost, appearing in public only to carry out the next bloody act. This isolation protected society from symbolic defilement through contact with the harbinger of death. The services of a professional executioner were paid for very generously, which partially compensated for his social isolation. The carnifex received a steady salary from the treasury and also had the right to take the clothing and personal belongings of the executed. This custom of looting was legalized and served as an excellent supplement to his otherwise bleak income. Furthermore, wealthy convicts often bribed him to ensure the blow was delivered with maximum precision and minimal pain. The executioner's financial prosperity stood in stark contrast to his status as a social outcast. He was a wealthy man with nowhere to go and no one with whom to spend his blood money. The psychological strain of taking people's lives on a daily basis was unbearable for a normal human psyche. Most executioners suffered from severe mental disorders and drowned out their inner emptiness with massive doses of cheap wine. Alcoholism was considered an occupational hazard among those who were constantly knee-deep in blood. Only complete emotional detachment and the perception of execution as routine mechanical work helped them keep their sanity. For the carnifex, the condemned ceased to be a human being long before the sword fell upon his neck. This professional detachment was the only way to survive under conditions of constant stress. Interestingly, the executioner's duties included not only killings, but also overseeing the torture chambers. He directed the interrogation process with a particular flair, precisely calibrating the level of physical force applied to the accused. He had to break bones, cauterize skin, and dislocate joints to extract the necessary confessions. This work required sadistic tendencies, which gradually developed in all practitioners of this profession. Society hypocritically condemned him for his cruelty, even though it demanded these confessions to pass judgment. The executioner served as the perfect scapegoat for the collective guilt of the entire ancient state. The figure of the ancient executioner vividly illustrates the double standards of the entire ancient judicial system. The state needed his cruelty, but categorically refused to recognize him as a full-fledged member of society. He was a dark reflection of the law, the living embodiment of that primal fury which the law sought to control. Studying this profession allows us to understand the true nature of power built on fear and violence. Modern society has hidden the process of punishment behind the high walls of prisons, rendering executioners invisible. However, in antiquity, this man was the most honest symbol of the entire state apparatus. Modern people are accustomed to the idea that safety on the streets is ensured by armed police patrols. Popular culture often transports this image into the past, depicting legionnaires chasing criminals through narrow alleys. However, in reality, the ancient metropolis had absolutely no professional police force in the modern sense of the word. A vast city with a population of millions managed without investigators, detectives, or local police officers. Law enforcement was highly chaotic and decentralized, relying on the initiative of the citizens themselves. This radically changes our understanding of how the ancient urban environment functioned. The main state force in the city at night were the so-called vigils, or night watchmen. Their primary task was not to fight crime, but to prevent catastrophic fires in the overcrowded city. The vigils patrolled the streets with buckets and axes, on the lookout for flames, not for thieves lurking in the shadows. Fire posed a far greater threat to wooden Rome than 100 of the most dangerous serial killers. The authorities logically directed resources toward fire protection, leaving the protection of property to the conscience of the owners themselves. For the vigils, fighting crime was merely a secondary and not the most important duty. If a citizen fell victim to a robbery, he had nowhere to call and no one to turn to for help. He had to find the criminal on his own, gather evidence, and physically drag him to court. The state provided no detectives to investigate the theft of a beloved tunic or a purse of coins. The victim became investigator, field agent, and prosecutor all in one, relying solely on his own strength. This system forced people to band together in neighborhood communities to jointly defend their homes. Law and order depended on personal responsibility and everyone's willingness to use force. The absence of an official police force bred an incredible level of corruption among street gangs and criminal groups. Crime bosses took entire neighborhoods under their control, collecting protection money from local merchants. This primitive mafia performed police functions, punishing outsiders and maintaining a strict code of conduct for thieves within their territory. The authorities turned a blind eye to this, as the gangsters ensured stability better than the non-existent patrols. It was in the state's interest to cooperate with the gang leaders so as not to spend money on creating law enforcement agencies. This symbiosis of crime and authority replaced the modern, complex legal system. At night, life in the ancient metropolis came to a complete standstill, giving way to primal fear. The streets were unlit, turning into ideal labyrinths for ambushes and brutal attacks. Law-abiding citizens bolted their doors shut and tried not to go outside until dawn. Traveling through the city at night without torchbearers and armed guards was considered suicidal folly. Darkness was the criminal underworld's greatest ally and the most insurmountable obstacle for the authorities. After sunset, the city belonged to robbers, murderers, and packs of feral dogs. There were professional informants, known as delators, who made a living off accusations. They spied on citizens and, in exchange for a percentage of confiscated property, reported crimes to the authorities. These people partially replaced the investigative agencies, gathering information and identifying those dissatisfied with the regime. The realization that no one would protect you except yourself drastically altered people's psychology. Paradoxically, the level of petty crime remained low precisely because of the absence of police. A robber knew he would not be arrested, have his rights read to him, and be taken to a comfortable police station. The crowd would simply tear him to pieces right at the scene of the crime, without trial or investigation. Fear of uncontrollable popular anger deterred crime more effectively than any organized police force. It was a brutal but remarkably effective mechanism of social self-regulation in ancient society. Ancient builders possessed an incredible talent for erecting structures that inspired awe and reverence. However, their mastery was evident not only in luminous temples, but also in the creation of architecture of absolute horror. The most striking example of such a dark genius was the famous Mamertine prison, located in the very heart of the capital. It was the only official place of imprisonment in Rome, intended exclusively for the most dangerous state criminals. Its very design broke the prisoners' spirits even before they learned their final sentence. The architecture of this place served a single purpose: the complete destruction of human hope. The building had no windows, tall towers, or massive gates characteristic of modern prison complexes. It lay hidden underground, like a festering wound on the body of a great and beautiful city. The entrance was merely a modest door at the foot of Capitoline Hill, leading into darkness. Its outward inconspicuousness stood in stark contrast to the horror that awaited prisoners within those ancient walls. The architects had deliberately shielded this place of suffering from sunlight, making it resemble a descent into the realm of the dead. This symbolism was perfectly clear to every inhabitant of the ancient metropolis. The Tullianum was designed so that sound inside would be amplified many times over by echoes. The moans of a single dying prisoner would bounce off the smooth walls, driving all the other inhabitants of the pit mad. The architects had created the perfect acoustic torture chamber, where silence was an unattainable luxury. The absence of corners deprived a person of even the chance to lean back and try to sleep in the water. The geometry of the space worked against the prisoner, robbing them of the last shreds of physical and mental comfort. Ancient engineers knew a thing or two about creating unbearable conditions without resorting to complex mechanisms. Only those whom the state considered a threat to its very existence were sent to the Tullianum. It was here that the leaders of rebellious tribes, dangerous conspirators, and defeated enemy kings met their ends. The famous Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix spent several years in this pit before being publicly strangled. The system made no allowances for royal lineage, turning great warriors into broken, filthy rags. Dying in battle by a legionary sword was considered the highest blessing compared to the slow decay in this hole. The Mamertine prison ground down greatness and pride with mechanical ruthlessness. Cold and damp were not the only executioners in this underground stone sack. The complete lack of oxygen often led to prisoners suffocating even before their official execution. Guards would sometimes lower a torch on a rope, and if it went out, it meant the air below had become deadly. Corpses could float for days in the icy water alongside people still alive, spreading cadaveric poison. Retrieving bodies from there was an extremely difficult task, so the guards did so only very rarely. The Tullianum was a veritable factory for producing nameless, decomposing remains. Today, tourists descend into the Mamertine prison to touch upon the grim pages of ancient history. However, modern lighting and dry floors cannot convey even a tenth of that primal horror. The architecture of this dungeon proves that the ancient world was infinitely far from romantic ideals. It was built on brutal pragmatism, where suffering was considered a perfectly acceptable instrument of the state. Exploring such places helps dispel illusions and reveal the true cost of the ancient order. Roman prisons did not reform people. They professionally and methodically wiped them off the face of the earth. The ancient judicial system never pretended to be blind or equally fair to all segments of the population. The concept of equality before the law was utterly foreign to a society built on a strict class hierarchy. Birth, wealth, and political status completely determined the fate of a person who found themselves in the dock. The same act could be interpreted as a minor prank by a patrician or a mortal sin by a commoner. The system was designed to protect the elite and brutally suppress any attempts by the lower classes. Understanding this difference is critical to grasping the full mechanics of ancient social control. If a noble senator committed murder, the trial often devolved into political bargaining and intrigue. He was not thrown into a damp dungeon or tortured with red-hot iron to extract a full confession. The patrician remained under house arrest in his luxurious villa, enjoying wine in the company of slaves. The court took into account his service to the fatherland, the antiquity of his lineage, and the amount of money contributed to the right magistrates. Often, the punishment was an honorable exile to a picturesque island, with most of his property preserved. The death penalty was applied to the elite only in cases of direct treason or conspiracy against the emperor himself. They were immediately thrown into dungeons with rats, where they awaited their turn for a public and agonizing death. Stealing a piece of meat from the market could lead a person to the cross or into the arena with hungry lions. This glaring difference in approach demonstrated whose interests ancient law actually protected. Legal representation was also a privilege reserved exclusively for the wealthy and influential members of ancient society. The best orators demanded astronomical sums for their services, sums beyond the reach of an ordinary person in a lifetime. The poor man defended himself, stammering his way through a defense before a judge who already despised him for his poverty. As a result, the courts were filled with brilliant acquittals for the rich and death sentences for the commoners. The justice system functioned as a filter that let gold coins through and held back only the dirty water. This corruption was considered a normal part of the judicial process. Interestingly, sometimes the slaves of wealthy people had a better chance of leniency than free poor people. A master could intercede on behalf of his valuable slave by compensating for the damage caused by the slave out of his own pocket. A slave with rare skills, such as a doctor or a secretary, was worth a fortune, and losing him was unprofitable. A free commoner, however, lacking an influential patron, was left alone to face the ruthless machinery of the state. This created a paradoxical situation in which personal freedom did not guarantee a person legal protection. Belonging to a powerful house offered better protection than even the most just law. Inequality was not a flaw in the system, but its very foundation, ensuring the stability of the vast slave-owning empire. The illusion of justice crumbled at the very first clash between a commoner and the interests of a patrician. This harsh historical lesson helps us better understand the mechanics of power in the ancient world. In summarizing the study of the ancient justice system, we must answer the most important and complex question: why, in the absence of police, prisons, and modern technology, did the level of street crime remain paradoxically low? The answer lies in a deep understanding of human psychology and the masterful use of total, all-encompassing fear. The state created an atmosphere in which the very thought of breaking the law was instantly blocked by terror of the inevitable consequences. This system of psychological terror worked far more effectively than any surveillance cameras or electronic ankle monitors. Ancient rulers were master manipulators, skilled at controlling the instincts of crowds numbering in the millions. Every day, people witnessed the brutal and theatrical destruction of those who had crossed the invisible line of what was permitted. This shock therapy was firmly imprinted on the subconscious, forming a conditioned reflex of submission in entire generations. Modern society has hidden death behind prison walls, thereby losing this most powerful preventive tool. Collective responsibility in the system of informants destroyed any trust within potential criminal groups. It is impossible to organize a large-scale conspiracy or a gang when every accomplice might turn you in tomorrow for a reward. Relatives kept an eye on one another, realizing that a single family member's misstep could lead to the execution of everyone else. The absence of the concept of humanism in ancient philosophy gave judges and executioners free rein. Society felt no compassion for criminals, viewing them as defective material to be disposed of immediately. No one wrote petitions in defense of the rights of crucified slaves or demanded better conditions at the Mamertine prison. Ruthlessness was considered a virtue, not a vice, if it was used to protect the state order. The criminal found himself in an absolute social vacuum, without the slightest hope of sympathy or forgiveness. This isolation broke people down much faster than any sophisticated metal instruments of torture. The theatricalization of violence turned execution into a spectacle, shifting the focus from the horror of what was happening to an element of entertainment. The crowd, screaming with delight at the sight of a man torn apart by a lion, subconsciously identified with the victorious authority. People felt their own strength and security as they watched the death of someone who had dared to disturb their peace. This ingenious psychological solution allowed for the channeling of the lower classes' aggression without directing it toward the elite. The state provided the people with a dose of someone else's blood, thereby guaranteeing loyalty and quiet in the streets. The bloody games were not a manifestation of savagery, but the pinnacle of ancient social engineering. Understanding the psychology of ancient fear helps us better appreciate the fragility of our modern humanistic world. We have abandoned public executions and torture pits, replacing them with prison cells, lawyers, and long sentences. However, the rise in recidivism often casts doubt on the absolute correctness of the path humanity has chosen. The study of the ancient judicial and penitentiary system completely shatters many modern romantic myths about antiquity. Behind the white marble facades of temples and the grandeur of Roman law lay a machine of absolute, merciless terror. The state did not build prisons for rehabilitation. It built arenas for the spectacular and demonstrative destruction of offenders. Cruel conditions of temporary detention, corruption, and class inequality were the norm, not the exception. A look at this dark side of history allows us to appreciate the immense progress humanity has made. Understanding the past, however gruesome it may be, is critically important for the development of modern civilization. The history of Roman justice proves that crime rates are directly dependent on the fear of inevitable punishment. Ancient rulers did not attempt to understand a criminal's motives. They simply deprived him of the opportunity to repeat his offense. This system was infinitely cruel and unjust, yet terrifyingly effective in maintaining order. Viewers can draw their own conclusions about the extent to which modern methods surpass ancient survival practices. Viewers are invited to share their thoughts in the comments and discuss this complex historical paradigm. Assessing the effectiveness of ancient terror remains one of the most debated topics in modern historical scholarship.